How's it going, guys? It's John here from Hot Take Hockey to talk about the Vancouver Canucks and their potential trade targets leading into the NHL trade deadline 2019. So the Canucks are in a very interesting situation. The Western Conference in general is in an interesting situation because no team is really out of the playoff race. No team has really made a decision on buyers or sellers. The Canucks are no different. They are a team that really wants to look into the future, but have some pieces that have been really impressive this season. You could start from Elias Pettersson all the way to the new acquisition of Josh Leivo. So for the Canucks, I'll talk about some trade targets and then also talk about some players that they could be looking to move and then what their future holds from now to the trade deadline and also into years to come. So let's start with trade targets. Who are the Canucks looking at? Well, there's been some talk of the Canucks. You know what? They look pretty set down the middle, maybe a little crowded down the middle. You've obviously got Pettersson, you got Bo Horvat, then you got Brandon Sutter, Jay Beagle, you got Gaudette there as well. You've got centerman. In terms of defense, a little weaker on the right side, but that's kind of been the Canucks story for the last few years. The only guy that's been pretty decent and somewhat consistent is Chris Tanev, but injury problems and question in terms of value has always been around Tanev. And then obviously your goaltending has been unreal this season. Jacob Markstrom, the best player arguably for the Canucks in the last 2 months, along with Pettersson. So that's a factor. And then the call-up of Thatcher Demko has been pretty impressive and pretty exciting for Canucks fans. So who are the big wingers that they could get? Because that is probably the hole. You obviously acquired Josh Leivo, who has like 7 goals through 24 games as a Canuck, which is really good. But you want a more reliable and a guy that's going to definitely feed you those 25, 30 goals. Because right now, if Leivo had played a full season with the Canucks, he'd be on pace for about 23, 24 goals through an 82-game season. So let's talk about those wingers. Craig Button on TSN did refer to 2 wingers as being a possibility. Gustav Nyquist and Jakob Silfverberg. The Red Wings and Ducks are like the 2 teams that are so far down right now. The Ducks, again, not so much because the losing streak is what has put them down like the farthest, but any team in the West is like still in it. The Red Wings are a team that's definitely rebuilding. Gustav Nyquist has been over and again in trade rumors. So those 2 guys, it makes sense with Craig Button saying that. Another guy, I kind of read about it and I'm thinking about it in my head. I think a guy like Patrick Maroon, who probably wouldn't be a huge price. But the other thing is the St. Louis Blues, again, are kind of back in the playoff race. So if Maroon's value to them. But I feel like if we're talking about guys that are not going to garner like first-round picks, then it's probably a Patrick Maroon's a good price. This one is kind of the opposite of what I was just talking about, and that's a Michael Furland. The Canucks, along with a few other teams, have been talked about with Furland for a while now, for a few months. If he's looking like a similar contract of Tom Wilson, and it's going to be somewhere in the 5 to 6 million range, I can't see it being closer to the 6. But if it gets towards like north of the 5, which is very possible it does because of his production, the type of player he is, the Hurricanes won't pay that. So if they're going to look for a first-round pick, I don't know if the Canucks would want to give up their first-round pick. I don't think that's smart. But they're definitely interested in a winger like that, and Michael Furland's definitely that kind of guy they want. Another guy is Andrei Burakovsky with the Capitals. The Canucks have been around him as well for a while. His value is interesting. I'm actually going to throw out a trade scenario right now, before even talking about the possible players the Canucks could lose. I could see the Capitals being interested in a guy like Marcus Granlund, a really good utility player, could play like from second line to being your 13th forward. He's a really good utility guy. He can play center, can play wing. I could see the Capitals be interested in that kind of guy. Obviously, the Burakovsky value in terms of the Capitals especially would probably be higher, so maybe the Canucks would have to include another piece, most likely. But I'm just throwing that out there. And just a couple more players. Cody Ceci is just a guy to throw out there. I feel like he could use a big change of scenario from Ottawa. And maybe the Canucks, who, like I said, have trouble on that right side, could take on a Cody Ceci. And then last, this one has been talked about for a while. It's not a roster player right now on a team, but Dante Fabro, right now with the Nashville Predators, but not under contract, not with the team. The Preds are obviously, we know about it. Their defense is like legendary. Everyone talks about the Nashville Predators as a defense you want to model your defense around. Dante Fabro, a right-handed defenseman, 20 years old. He's with Boston University right now. If he stays for the next 2 years, he can become a free agent. It's not looking like he's going to sign with Nashville. He wouldn't be able to show his skills. He wouldn't be able to showcase what he's got in Nashville in a top 4 role. So maybe the Canucks can solve that. Maybe it's like a second-round pick and a B-level prospect that gets Dante Fabro, a guy that, in my opinion, will definitely be a top 4 defenseman, maybe even higher. His ceiling's really up in the air because we haven't seen pro hockey from him yet, other than in university and below. So for Dante Fabro, that could be a really good option, especially him being a right-handed defenseman. We saw him in all kind of juniors hockey, so it really depends. I think that was another interesting thing to bring up. But let's talk about, on top of Marcus Granlund, the couple players that they could give up. They've been in huge talks with Edler, but it's been up and down. He obviously had the injury, but I think the Canucks want to keep him. A good veteran in the locker room. He's been obviously a key piece for the Canucks, despite no success, but he's been there from the start, so obviously they want to keep him. But 2 guys that they might still want to trade, one being Jake Virtanen, but I think a lot of fans want to keep him, and I think you should keep a Jake Virtanen. But the other one, and I think they should look into trading, is Brandon Sutter. He's like on a 4.25 around there, $1 million contract. He's a guy you should look into getting rid of. That kind of sounds harsh, but Jay Beagle can play the third line role. Even Gaudette could play there. You have 4 reliable centers there. Brandon Sutter, who had injury problems as well, you should look into trading him. Sam Gagner as well, actually, who's been loaned to the Toronto Marlies. There's been some talk that the Chicago Blackhawks at one point were interested in maybe like a power play specialist there. He's got 1 extra year compared to Sutter, who's got 2 extra years. Both will be harder to move in terms of contract. Gagner tougher because he hasn't been in the NHL and he's just over $3 million on an AAV, so that'll be interesting too. This was just a whole conversation about the Canucks, guys. I think the Canucks have some promise. I mean, from Quinn Hughes to Jet Wu, there's promise for Vancouver, especially on the back end. And now with Elias Pettersson leading your forward group and the emergence of a tandem in Jacob Markstrom and Thatcher Demko, I think there's a lot of promise in Vancouver. I think Canucks fans should see that. And you know what? If you don't make the playoffs this year, which any Western Conference team is still up in the air in terms of playoffs right now, you should still look into being excited for what this team does. At least you're not the Edmonton Oilers and you're wasting your best player's career right now. A little bit of a hot take. But Elias Pettersson, he's in his rookie year and look what he's doing. Be excited, Canucks fans. I think you should be. But that's it for this video. Please subscribe to the channel, drop a like. This was the Canucks trade targets video. We talked about players they could target, players they could trade away, and what's next for the Vancouver Canucks. All right, have a good one. Peace out.